Before we break for Salah and food, inshallah, I just want to invite a wonderful sister in our community, someone I have the privilege to look up to, even though I'm taller than her. Sorry, we're always throwing shade at Somalis. Our second speaker is Amira Elghawaby. She's probably no stranger to all of you. On a side note, I see her at everywhere that matters. I went to the Edmonton Mosquers Film Festival, a film festival for all Muslims, and she was there on the plane with me and speaking. I saw her at the unveiling and screening of a film the other day called So You Want to Be Muslim. It was a beautiful film. And then I happened to see her occupy all the spaces that are important for our voices to matter. She's the special representative of combating Islamophobia, a journalist and human rights advocate, became Canada's special representative on combating Islamophobia in January 2023. Amira has been actively involved in many initiatives countering hate and promoting inclusion, including as a founding member of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. Please welcome my sister and friend, Amira Elghawaby.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Iskawaran? Okay, alhamdulillah. One of my best friends, some of you may know her, Tamam Ahmed Jama, my bestie, so she taught me a few Somali words, so I like to practice when I can. Thank you so much, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here at the Khayrhaye Somali Cultural Center for providing me an opportunity to talk with you, to participate in this annual gala. And of course, a very, very special thank you to Sister Khaltoon Musa, who is a pioneer, a visionary, and her whole team for inviting me here. I actually met her a while ago. I lose track of time, so maybe it was last year, maybe it was last month, I don't remember, but with the Djiboutian community event that was wonderful back in the summer, so there you go. And she was very insistent. She told me, please, I'm gonna have a gala, I want you to come to it. And so I'm very pleased to be with all of you here. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible work of the Somali Center for Family Services, who I see are a sponsor of tonight's event, as well as the Ottawa Islamic School. So these are two very valuable institutions in our city. And I started engaging in this type of work as a journalist over 20 years ago at the CBC. And I can tell you that the Somali Center for Family Services was around doing incredible work. Brother Abdelrazak Karod was there. The Ottawa Islamic School, I remember doing stories about the way that they were empowering young people. And so just a really big thank you to everyone who builds these institutions and builds them to last. I also want to thank OC Transpo, who I saw as a sponsor for your event, and TWO's technical support, and the Changemaker Lab, which really speaks to allyship as well. Being able to work across and outside of our own communities with community partners to advance inclusion and equity for all of us. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are, of course, gathered here on unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, of which we are very humble and blessed to be living with and here. So I'm very honored to be here with you tonight. Lovely to see this crowd, beautiful representation here, really celebrating our histories, celebrating Somali culture, Somali history, and really demonstrating to everyone why it is so important that we tell our own stories, that we are the ones that take over the narratives that we know can exist about our communities, that can be negative, that can be presenting us in a way that's not actually reflective of who we are, and taking that responsibility ourselves by establishing our own institutions that tell those stories. So the Khayrhaye Museum is working to preserve and celebrate and educate our communities about the rich Somali heritage, culture, and history. This is really valuable work. By showing and having exhibitions, having research, and encouraging community engagement, the museum is actively fostering unity, cultural pride, and seeking to bridge the gap between generations. So I really do want to acknowledge the importance of this work and the cultural mission that all of you are supporting tonight, and uniting us around cultural events and common values, which really will build a strong sense of togetherness, which is now more important than ever. So for my role as Canada's Special Representative on combating Islamophobia, I want to tell you that you, by being here, by being present, are making my job that much easier, because you are all taking part in not being passive agents, accepting the stereotypes that exist about our community, but countering them simply by saying, we are not going to accept the stories that are told about us. We will tell our authentic stories. So as you already know, Canada's Muslim communities are incredibly diverse. We have so many backgrounds, so many ethnicities, so many intersectional identities. Black Muslims are a valuable part of our social fabric. They add to the rich tapestry of Canadian Black communities as a whole, and they contribute every day despite facing significant historical barriers and oppression. And let me be clear, we all have a responsibility to help remove barriers for any community that's facing it. Empowering one another and making sure that we provide opportunities for growth, for contribution, is really a responsibility that we all have to carry. But we also have to know that sometimes when we're going through difficult circumstances, the pain can be at times overwhelming, especially now when we're seeing the global events unfolding around the world, impacting us here at home. We are seeing crises that are impacting Canada's Muslim communities in the war in Sudan, which has resulted in a humanitarian catastrophe in what has become the largest displacement of people in the world. The ongoing challenges that many of your loved ones who are still in Somalia are facing. And of course in Gaza, the ongoing war that has impacted Palestinian Canadians whose families have been lost. These are having incredibly hurtful and painful impacts here in Canada as well. Over this past year, there has been a distressing surge in Islamophobia in Canada, which has been compounded by stark rises in anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian hate and racism. This in addition to other forms of racism, including anti-Black racism and increasingly racism towards members of South Asian communities. This is particularly difficult for many of us, as we still recall the attacks on the Quebec City Mosque in 2017, the attacks against our London family in 2021, not to mention the discriminatory legacy of the post-9/11 era. According to the National Council of Canadian Muslims, we have seen a 1,000% increase in incidents of Islamophobia since October 7th. The Institute for Strategic Dialogue has found that there has been a 422% increase in Islamophobia online. In recent months, many of you may have seen what happened in the United Kingdom, where there was anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant riots fueled by hatred and divisive narratives. And this reminds us that we should not be complacent. It can take a very simple piece of misinformation to turn people against one another. So we have to guard against these trends. Many in our communities are already concerned with this rise of Islamophobia here, including harassment, vandalism, and violence. The specific targeting of Muslim women who wear hijab, including reports of assaults, of women being spat on, of having their hijabs removed forcefully. And recognizing that intersectional identities that we all hold means that members of our communities can be targeted or discriminated against on multiple levels for their race, ethnicity, gender, ability, and religion, and more. So for instance, when we talked about, Habiba mentioned I saw her in Edmonton. In Edmonton, in fact, over a period of about 8 months between 2020 and 2021, Black Muslim women specifically were being targeted in violent assaults. And so the community had to come together, particularly Muslim women, to say, no, we won't accept that. And they actually initiated a campaign against hate, calling on the entire city to stand up for collective responsibility for our safety. So we also know that Islamophobia and racism has an impact on our employment outcomes, with members of our communities often being very well educated, yet often underemployed or unemployed. And this we see impacting every facet of our society and affecting our lives and Canada's prosperity in many ways. And I think this can make things feel a little bit scary for some of us right now. And for the young people in the crowd as well, you may wonder how this is going to impact your futures in Canada. And I want to say that we have to keep having hope. We have to keep having hope because without it, what else can we do? We have hope in a room like this one, where all of us remain proud of our identities, remain proud to be able to come together in this way, to celebrate our cultures, to celebrate our faith, to understand that in Canada, there is a concept of multiculturalism. While it's not a perfect concept, it does make a difference. It does tell us that our diversity is something to be celebrated. And as the Minister of Diversity and Inclusion often says, diversity is a fact, inclusion is a choice. Today, over 20% of the country's population is foreign-born, with more and more people arriving in Canada due to evolving immigration policies. We know that Muslims now comprise over 1.8 million Canadians, approximately 5% of the population. 50% of our communities are under the age of 35. 25% are under the age of 15. So I want you to think about how are we going to guide the future Canadian Muslims to take leadership roles in our society and fully be able to contribute. And I think together we can. Our collective strength, the power of our communities, leaders like Khaltoon, like Habiba Ali, like Dr. Suleiman Wahad, like the Canadian Association of Somali Mothers who have done amazing work in our city, like people like Farah Osman, so many others within Ottawa's Somali community and beyond have been doing incredible work. Before I conclude, I just want to share with you a little bit about how my office came about. So after the killing of our London family, so 4 members of one family were out for an evening, 5 family members were out for an evening walk, and a man deliberately turned his truck around. He had intended to hurt and kill Muslims, and he struck this beautiful family deliberately. A mother, a father, a grandmother, and a daughter were killed, and a little boy was left orphaned. After that tragic terrorist attack, communities called on the federal government to do something, and they held a summit on Islamophobia. Over 100 recommendations were made by community members just like yourselves to say what could be done at all levels of government to address this deadly type of hate that has affected Canadian Muslims in ways that haven't been seen in other G7 countries. We've had the highest number of deadly attacks against Muslims of any other G7 country. And so among the recommendations was the recommendation to create this office to combat Islamophobia. And so every day, our office is working with a team of about just around 9 people, so it's a small team, but we're working on policies, on advice to the government on how we can address the discrimination and bias that I just came to talk about. The Canadian government has launched an action plan to combat hate. It has launched an anti-racism strategy as well. There is an organization that has the Muslim Archives in Canada, which tells the stories of Canadian Muslims, and I encourage the museum to be in touch and share with them these artifacts as well. And last fall, we started working specifically on hate crimes and providing advice to police services on how to help make sure that Muslim communities are feeling safe. We also have launched digital toolkits and resources on our website that I encourage you to all visit and sign up for. We'll soon come out with a guide on combating Islamophobia that can be utilized within schools, within workplaces, throughout, to help educate fellow Canadians on how to address this phenomenon. And most recently, the Prime Minister of Canada committed the government to adopting a definition on anti-Palestinian racism. So there is much work to do, and I can't do it without the support of our communities and fellow Canadians who care deeply. Nearly 50% of Canadians have said they want to be allies to Muslims in this country. And so we have a lot to be grateful for, but we can never take it for granted. And so my parting message to you is please do your part. Please be present. Please pay attention to what's going on around us. Please take part in your children's schools. Take part in municipal activities. Take part. Be active and engaged and help others. Demonstrate what our faith actually teaches us. Don't just tell people what Islam says. Show them. Thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you, and Mahad Sanid.